let us look at the fact of psychological movement. So, before we inquire into truth, we must understand the instrument that seeks it. That instrument is the mind. And the mind, as we ordinarily know it, is in a constant movement. Observe yourself for a few moments. You will notice there is thought, there is memory, there is anticipation, there is comparison, there is judgment, there is desire. All this movement appears continuously. Even when you are silent outwardly, inwardly there is speech, there is commentary, there is narration, and the mind rarely rests. Now ask, is this movement deliberate or is it automatic? And if you watch carefully, you will see that most thought arises mechanically. A memory triggers an association produces emotion generates further thought. This chain reaction sustains itself. This mechanical continuity creates the sense of a me who is thinking. But is that so? Or is the me itself part of the chain? Look closely. Thought says, I'm thinking. But the thought, I'm thinking, is itself another thought. So, who is the thinker apart from thought? We assume a thinker behind the thought, but in direct observation, we only find thinking. The thinker is constructed by thought as a center of continuity. This is the first important insight. The self, as we ordinarily experience, it is a psychological construction sustained by memory and thought. Now, let us understand the structure of the psychological self. Let us examine this self. It is made up of a name, a form, a memory, experiences, knowledge, belief, wound, pleasure, fear. Now, remove memory and what remains of your identity? If all psychological memory were absent, that is your past insults, your achievements, your nationality, your religion, would the psychological you exist in the same way? The self is therefore time bound. It is a narrative built from yesterday and projected into tomorrow. This is crucial. The self exists as psychological time. Now, psychological time is not chronological time. Chronological time is needed to cook, to travel, to learn a language. Psychological time is the movement of becoming. That is, I was, I will be, I must become. In this becoming lies conflict. Because what is never satisfactory to the self. The self seeks modification. It seeks enhancement. It seeks security in permanence. Thus, the self is always in motion toward something. Now, this motion is desire. So, let us understand desire and the illusion of fulfillment. So, let us observe desire. There is perception, there is contact, there is sensation, there is thought. Now, this thought says, I want that. Without thought, sensation is brief, but with thought, sensation becomes desire. Thought sustains and magnifies sensation by image. So, desire is sustained by image making. For example, you see a house, sensation arises, thought creates an image of yourself in that house. The image produces psychological pleasure, and the mind pursues the image. Therefore, desire is the pursuit of psychological continuity through image. This applies not only to objects but also to enlightenment, truth, God. So if you say, I want truth, what do you want? Do you want the unknown, or do you want an image of fulfillment constructed by thought? And if it is constructed, it belongs to the known. And what belongs to the known cannot be truth, because truth cannot be projected by memory. Thus, the search for truth, when motivated by desire, is merely the extension of self. Now let us go into fear. Fear as the shadow of psychological time. Where there is desire, there is fear. Fear of losing what is gained, fear of not attaining what is desired, fear of death, fear of loneliness, fear of insignificance. Observe fear carefully. Is fear about the present moment, or about thought projecting into the future? If a tiger stands before you, there is immediate action, not fear as psychological narrative. Fear as we ordinarily know it is thought projecting danger. Therefore, fear is rooted in time. Time as thought, time as memory moving into imagination. Thus, both desire and fear are sustained by psychological time. And psychological time sustains the self. So, the self is sustained by desire and fear, which are movements of thought in time. Now, let us go into conflict and fragmentation. When the self operates through desire and fear, conflict is inevitable. I should be this, I should not be that, I must overcome, I must achieve. There is division between what is and what should be. This division is created by thought, comparing present reality with an ideal image. The ideal is thought's projection. Therefore, Conflict is the result of thought opposing itself. The observer says, I must control my anger. But the observer is also part of anger because the observer is the accumulation of past reactions. Thus, the observer and the observed are not separate. This is not a philosophical statement, it is an observable fact. When you are angry, the anger is not separate from you. The division arises afterward. When thought comments, I am angry, this division sustains the conflict. Where there is division, there is struggle. Where there is struggle, there is distortion. And when there is distortion, perception is clouded. Therefore, the mind caught in division cannot perceive truth. Now let us look into conditioning. You are conditioned by culture, your religion, education, your family, language you use, experiences, your traumas. All these conditioning shapes your perception. If you are raised in a particular belief system, that belief becomes a lens. Through that lens, you interpret reality. Thus, what you call reality is often interpretation filtered through conditioning. The Hindu, the Christian, the atheist all interpret through prior knowledge. But truth cannot be relative to conditioning. If truth depends on culture, it is not truth but opinion. Therefore, to inquire into truth, one must become aware of conditioning. Not try to escape it, not replace it, but see it fully. Seeing conditioning is already the beginning of freedom from it. Because what is fully understood loses its unconscious grip. Now let us understand observation but without the observer. We have arrived at something delicate. If the self is constructed by thought and thought sustains psychological time and psychological time sustains conflict, then what is required is observation without the interference of thought. Is that possible? Normally, observation is accompanied by interpretation. You see a tree and say, this is an oak tree. The word intervenes between perception and the thing. The word is memory. Memory dulls direct perception. Can there be perception without naming? Try it. Look at something familiar without labeling it. For a brief instant, there is pure perception. In that instant, there is no center separate from what is seen. There is only seeing. That seeing is not mediated. That seeing is not mediated by past. In such seeing, the observer is absent. This is not mystical. It is direct fact. When the observer is absent, there is no division. Where there is no division, there is no conflict. And where there is no conflict, the mind is quiet. Now, let us understand the nature of silence. Silence is not enforced suppression of thought. Suppression is in fact conflict. Silence arises naturally when thought understands its own limitation. Thought has its place in practical matters, but thought cannot touch the immeasurable because thought is limited by knowledge. Knowledge is always partial. Therefore, thought is inherently limited. When thought sees its own limitation completely, it becomes quiet without effort. This quietness is not dullness. It is alert, sensitive, vibrant. In this silence, there is no psychological center. There is awareness without a boundary. So, what is real? Reality includes everything that thought has constructed. Beliefs are real. Nations are real. Money is real. Fear is real. Desire is real. They exist as psychological and social facts. But are they true? Reality includes illusion. An illusion is real as illusion, but it is not truth. Truth is not the opposite of falsehood. Truth is that which is not constructed by thought. Truth is not an idea, not a belief, not a conclusion, not an experience stored as memory. Because the moment you experience something and remember it, it becomes part of the known. Truth cannot belong to the known. Therefore, truth is not something you accumulate. If truth is not in the known, then the mind must be free from the known psychologically. This does not mean forgetting practical knowledge. It means freedom from psychological accumulation, freedom from carrying yesterday's hurt into today, freedom from projecting yesterday's pleasure or pain into tomorrow. When memory no longer dominates perception, each moment is fresh. In freshness, there is no center. In the absence of center, there is no boundary. And where there is no boundary, there is vastness. That vastness is not personal. It does not belong to you. The mind cannot claim it. The moment it claims, it reduces it to memory. Therefore, truth cannot be possessed. Now, let us understand death and renewal. Consider death. We fear death because it ends continuity. Continuity is the essence of the self. But if psychologically there is no clinging to continuity, if each moment ends completely, then death is not separate from living. To die each moment to past accumulation is to live in freshness. Such living has no psychological residue. Without residue, the mind remains young. In that youthfulness, there is innocence. Innocence is not ignorance, it is freedom from psychological burden. Innocence is necessary for truth. Let us understand love and truth. Where the self is active, love is absent, because the self seeks advantage. Love is not attachment, not dependency, not jealousy. Whereas attachment is fear of loss, dependency is psychological insufficiency, jealousy is comparison. These belong to the self. When the self is quiet, there is a different quality of relationship. In that state, there is care without possession. That quality is love. Love and truth are not separate because both require absence of self-centered movement. So what is the ultimate question? What is reality? If you have followed carefully, you may see that truth cannot be approached through seeking. Seeking implies a direction. Direction implies goal. Goal implies projection. And projection implies thought. Now, thought implies the known. Thus, seeking perpetuates the known. Truth reveals itself when and only when the known is silent. The silence is not cultivated, not practiced, not achieved. It comes when there is deep understanding of the whole movement of the self. Understanding is not intellectual agreement. It is a direct perception. When you see a snake, you do not need discipline to avoid it. Similarly, when you see the total structure of illusion, it drops naturally. In that dropping, the mind is free. So we ask, what is truth? Truth is not an object, not an experience, not a reward. Truth is the state of mind in which there is no distortion. This distortion arises from fear, from desire, memory, from conditioning. When these operate unconsciously, perception is clouded. When they are seen completely, they lose dominance. Then perception is direct. That direct perception is truth in action. It is not static, it is living. So, what is moving from the unreal to the real? The unreal is identification with psychological constructions. The real is what remains when construction ends. The unreal is becoming. The real is being. The unreal is time bound. And the real is timeless, not in mystical abstraction, but in the absence of psychological time. When the mind no longer moves as I was and I will be, but rests fully in what is, there is completeness. In that completeness, nothing is lacking. In that lack, desire ceases. And where desire ceases, fear dissolves. Where fear dissolves, division also ends. Where division ends, there is wholeness. Wholeness is holiness. And holiness is not separate from truth. So, you cannot reach truth. Understand, you cannot practice truth. You cannot systemize truth. Any system belongs to thought. Truth is uncovered when falseness is seen. Therefore, the path to truth is not accumulation but negation, not addition but subtraction. Subtract the illusions, subtract the identifications, subtract the psychological time. What remains is not created by you, it is simply there, unnameable, boundless, silent. That is reality. Not because someone says so, but because when the self is absent, what is left is not fragmentation, but totality. And totality is truth.